guys. I'm concerned about tokens not actually being used for the purpose they were meant, whether we're talking security or utility tokens. I mean, they were designed originally, mostly or partially, for operating blockchains and all that. Have you guys seen any data about whether tokens are really being used for blockchain purposes as opposed to secondary market trading? Because I'm concerned that a lot of the coins will become shit coins because they're not really being used.
You're best at that. You're the best at that. Yeah, Jason.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, so one thing we've always said is that 99.9% of these are going to fail unless they have real use case, and it's those ones that are already being used today that have some intrinsic value just on the basis of supply and demand. They're putting upwards pressure on the price and so on, and unfortunately, those ones that don't get used will go to zero slowly if they don't have any of that real use case. So you're right that it's been used as a funding model or a scam in a lot of ways, and very few have working products yet.
I guess one key difference that I would think about between the ICO model and the security token model is that with the security token, you actually have a proportion of the equity of the underlying asset. So the company, for example. And if I was investing in an STO, I'd probably be looking at what proportion of the equity is actually being put out in an STO. But I had a company that was putting out 98% of the equity in an STO. They've got nothing to lose. There's no down payment, really. As opposed to a company that had 20%, for example, in an STO, where there's still considerably something to lose, and there's a big vested interest in the success of that particular token, which makes it that's one of the few things that really makes it considerably different from an ICO versus an STO, and that's probably one rule of thumb to look at. Even though you're right, you're very likely to get down exactly the same route, a token becoming a sacrificial line for a company that's going to fail.
Yeah, I'll just add to that, yeah. I guess one parallel example is with the internet protocol. 20 years ago in 1996, people say, what good is the internet for? It takes me hours to send a message and it's slow and I've got to boot the computer. I think we're in this stage as well. It's always that similar cliche. But one thing that really I feel is a trend that's going to pick up is actually tokens that are actually used in the gaming industry, where swords and digital gold is being traded as credits, but they're actually tokens on a blockchain. We haven't seen something that is on large scale use on a mass adoption level besides the CryptoKitties that we're familiar with, but that could be something that would be a mass adoption from tokens on a blockchain.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think there's 2 points to that as well. So I think one good thing is all the FOMO on ICOs, I think it's finished now, right? So no one's really running it anymore and throwing the money on the table. But the good thing, one of the interesting things about security tokens, wherever you're going to, they need to be listed, right? Anyone can issue them in a primary market, but can these things be actually listed? So if you look in Malta's or Singapore with the RMOs, or in Switzerland they're doing it, so they're all raising the rules around listing a security token. And interestingly enough, the rules are very, very similar to listing it, interestingly enough, an equity. So don't just look at the issue of the primary market, as in the issuing of the STO. Make sure that actually can list somewhere. Does it qualify, right? So every market in the world is about to release, they'll all have their onboarding rules about listing on an exchange. So don't worry about the primary, worry about can it actually be listed and can you get out of this thing? Because that's the beauty of security tokens. As a secondary market, it has to be listed.
Yep.
Yep.
There's a couple there, yeah.
What's the technology below the token? Are they ERC 721 or are they the ERC 20 token? Or are they on the Ethereum? They'll have to be on the Ethereum blockchain.
So, I mean, Jason's from NEM, and we can already do mosaics on NEM. On Ethereum, we can just set different standards. So, as you said there, 721 is a non-fungible token, so we can sell a sword in a game that's not divisible versus a token in an ICO that we can sell half of on an exchange. So, yeah, there's new standards for Ethereum, and anything to add to that on NEM? Or?
No, basically there are about 100 different platforms, right? So Ethereum is the most popular, and there are multiple others. So and people are building it. So EOS, Bancor, Polymath, Harbor, Open Finance, T0, the list goes on, right? So the idea is that there are protocols looking in, but Ethereum sort of the popular one. But I think that there's space for multiple more to grow. Yeah. There you go. Yep, sure.
Just a quick one. With ICOs being basically tarnished permanently because of all the fraud
Okay.
scams,
Yeah.
do you see many ICOs relaunching as STOs?
Yeah.
Would that be an option that they could go and just go, hey, we know we sort of did it wrong, let's
Yeah.
relaunch as an STO
Yeah.
and have a second chance?
So this is an insight, right? Every company has a shelf life. So before this, oil and gas and property were top market cap companies. That shelf life has gone. Now the top market cap companies are tech companies like the Amazons, Alibabas, and Facebook. They're going to have a shelf life, and it's going to be something else. It could be space infrastructure. It could be something else. But within the crypto world, it's accelerated at an exponential velocity that today is ICOs, tomorrow is STOs. In fact, beyond STOs, there could be something else as well. But what we are seeing is an acceleration of companies' shelf life from being relevant to being irrelevant. So there could be a potential.
I'm working with a few clients at the moment who had intended to do an ICO and actually started publishing material for an ICO. Then they came to see me and I raised this issue with them that they're potentially managed investment schemes under Australian law. And as such, we're working at the moment with them to restructure their offerings to rely on these wholesale investor tests to raise money initially from wholesale investors only, to then build the platform. So you've got a platform that's functioning and working, and you've got a utility token that actually works. Then you can go to the market and sell it as a pre-sale of the service, and it won't be a managed investment scheme.
Right. That's there. Okay.
Zug, Malta, Cayman Islands, all the Singapore, Hong Kong, all those jurisdictions seem to be wiping the floor with a lot of other jurisdictions, not saying Australia included, in terms of their friendliness towards crypto and ICOs. Do you see that as the emergence of a trend? Particularly with reference to what John was saying about jurisdictions, you having to comply with the laws in every single jurisdiction that you offer tokens to.
Look, I think you're right that the jurisdictions in which these laws are being passed are getting a bit of a leg up because people are flocking there to do their ICOs and whatever. And I think that Australia needs to do something similar, otherwise we're going to be left behind and all the projects are going to go overseas. But notwithstanding that, as you noted from my presentation, you still do need to comply with other jurisdictions' laws. But notwithstanding that, these jurisdictions are a honeypot for ICOs to the tokens.
Yeah, John, get that one. That's a great question. Right? Let me talk about some of those jurisdictions. So I've kind of had the pleasure of looking at all of them indirectly or in my travels with all my pictures, right? But let's use Malta particularly. So it's interesting, right? So Malta has 450,000. It's a very, very small population. It's a really, really small population that, believe it or not, it has only two exports. It's potatoes and rabbits, right? Rabbits. So the national dish of Malta is a rabbit.
Wow.
And it's surrounded by beautiful seafood. So anyone, if you go to Santorini or you go to Mykonos, they've got beautiful seafood, but they do rabbits. Now what's fascinating really quickly about Malta is they have no exports. They have nothing. So Malta started off years ago in Cyprus. They were the biggest in foreign exchange trading. Then they moved into wagering. Right? They lead the world between Malta and Cyprus on wagering. But wagering is getting difficult. The people that are aware, the US about 2 months ago announced legalisation in all 50 states of wagering. So some of these countries, they innovate because they have to. Right? They have no choice. So if you have no exports, you have nothing. If you want a GDP, you have to do something smart. So what we've got to do in Australia is think the same way. Right? So, and to John's point, this is all fixable, but they want it more than we do. And it's an unbelievable area. We've got all the technical smarts. They're all in here, right? We've got an ability to do it, but we just don't have a framework. Exactly to John's point, that again, a corporations law. So Malta, Gibraltar, Estonia, they rewrote their corporations law from scratch, purely so again, you don't need wet signatures. You can use public-private key signing. Our problem is definitely not technology. We have the smartest people. I agree, right?
Yeah,
we're the smartest people in Australia, but why everyone's overseas is because we're not hungry enough in this country.
Yeah.
Give up coal.
Sorry?
Give up coal.
Well, no, and it's a good point, right? If you have to be honest, sorry, let me harp on. This is my soapbox thing. You're going to give me one extra 30. Can I get 10 seconds, right? But exactly. So the problem why everyone goes overseas is because, a quick story. When I was overseas, I can't believe it. I've been away for 2 weeks, and I was in Malta and everywhere else. The only thing I heard from Australia, apparently on this Sydney Opera House, we put a horse racing thing. And all the politicians and everybody, and it made the press, and you think, that's what we worry about in this country, right? We changed 5 prime ministers in 5 years, and the number one thing we fought about in the last week was a shock jock saying that I want my horse up there on the Sydney Opera House and all that. That's our problem. Right? That's our problem.
I think there's something else beyond just regulation paving the way. So you brought up Malta's rabbits and potatoes. I was born in Singapore. Singapore's 2 major exports: jokes about chewing gum and crazy rich Asians. Pretty much it is. And necessity is the mother of all invention, and that's what's driven these jurisdictions to do what they do. And so Singapore's moved forward in terms of jurisdiction. But the other major thing that you need to attract these businesses across is banking infrastructure. And that's something that we constantly and consistently shy away from talking about. Because the banking infrastructure in Singapore still hasn't caught up. So crypto companies in Singapore are still struggling to get bank accounts. They're still doing the whole damn loophole of setting up shell bank accounts so they can get shell companies so they can get a bank account. And we can see what these other jurisdictions are doing, but definitely I can tell you in Singapore, that's still a shortfall. And definitely in Australia, we can do whatever we want about jurisdiction, but banks are still private enterprises, and they don't fall within the same sort of jurisdiction that we're necessarily talking about. Until that sort of catches on, we're still going to be hamstrung by that leg.
Yeah, that's right.
One last line here. Yeah, just one line, right? Binance in the last quarter announced $340 million in transaction fees, and they're registered in Malta. Guess where did all the money go? That's a question. All right, next.
Now, actually, and one more point. So it's a really good point on banking, but why don't banks bank ICO? I'll tell you why not. We all know in the room why a bank wouldn't deal with crypto today. Everybody's running around so the banks won't do it. The banks will start dealing with, let's not call it crypto. In Malta, Estonia, it's called a virtual financial asset, right? So once it's regulated properly, the banks will flood themselves. We're talking with one right now. So the minute that these people are regulated to EU standards, to Australian standards, once people are regulated, the banks will work with them. But we can't keep saying, the banks don't work with us, and everyone's complaining that one of the big banks here keeps shutting off their crypto account. It's for a good reason. Right? So once we regulate the industry, the banks will happily deal with us. So.
Go ahead.
So.
Are there any gold-backed SCOs?
That's good. There are a whole bunch of them. I've got about 7 of them. One just did a project. They raised $50 million for a mine in Vegas. So they raised the money. And 2 seconds on that. It's a really clever idea. So when you do in the gold industry, there's 3 companies in the world that traditionally they're like De Beers. There's 3 companies that control funding into the gold industry. So if you've got land and you've got gold down there, there's 2 ways you can get money. Well, actually, there's 3. The first one is go to one of these 3 companies, and they'll take about 50% haircut. So what's the gold price? I don't know. Anyone know the gold price? If the gold price is $1,000 an ounce, you have to give it to them at $500 an ounce. The second way, if you want to fund 50 million, you go to a bank, and that's a really quick conversation, right? It's there's the door. There's a third way coming, right? So these security tokens, someone's already successfully raised 50 million. They raised the money, they've done the mine. Now they're trying to get a secondary market to do it, and it's a regulated product. And you'll see more of that in the next few weeks. What's going on, but. Then lithium, gold, all these kind of things, they'll just follow the same model. Because again, it gets rid of the barriers, because security tokens are ideal if you need a lot of capital and you don't care if you've got a whole bunch of small shareholders. It's a really clever model, and it fits in beautifully with a lot of capital intensive industries. So you'll see a whole bunch more of these start up. The big problem right now is that they could do lots of them, but the problem is these people sit on these security tokens and they can't get out of them. So again, it's waiting for a secondary market.
I don't recall the name of this, but grabbed me after the presentation. I've got it on my phone. I met with someone today who's doing a token which is redeemable for the value of 1 gram of gold. So you pay whatever 1 gram of gold is for that token, and in the future you can redeem it for whatever gold is worth at that particular point in time, and that creates the liquidity. But they're doing it as a derivative because they recognise that it meets the definition of a derivative under Australian law rather than a security.
How's it going, guys? My name's Harley, I'm from Agile Eagle. You all look great tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So first of all, STOs, they're great, they look great, but what I want to talk about is barrier to entry. So, as you may know, there's 2 big barriers to entry on both sides. So you have your company, who need an AFSL, and then you have your digital exchange, who needs a market license. These things aren't these things aren't easy to obtain. So what do you guys think will happen in the market? Like, will there be a monopoly, do you think, possibly, with the exchanges? Because not any exchange can get their market license.
Just to go on your first point about the AFSL, if someone's doing a security token offering, I don't believe they need an AFSL. Because the issuing shares in your own company or securities in your own company does not require an AFSL.
So in relation to MIS, let's say.
Oh, MIS, that's different. Yeah. So I think the move is going to be away from MISs and into securities, pure securities. Because as you identified, it is a barrier to entry. Some people actually want to do an MIS. So there's people who want to tokenise interest in managed investment schemes, whether it's real property or other assets. They will move towards the AFSL model. But others, I think, will move towards a security token offering. The second part of your question about the exchanges, so there's 2 different types of exchanges that you can operate under 2 different licenses in Australia. The first is a market operator license, which is the same as the license that the ASX had, or NSX. The second is, and this is not really a market as we probably understand that term, but you can have an AFSL which authorises you to make a market in securities. What that means is that the person who holds that licence, is the counterparty to every buy and sale of the security. Those licences are much easier to get, and I understand there's about 5 people who are applying for those licences specifically for security token offerings in Australia at the moment.
But do you think it will hinder innovation for projects? It's not so easy for a project to do an STO in comparison to a digital currency.
Well, for sure, and I think what you're really getting at is, and this is my personal view, that Australia should regulate to have a light touch regulatory regime for what we understand to be utility tokens. They should be excluded from the definition of a financial product and the definition of a managed investment scheme, and it should be based purely on disclosure, a mandated disclosure regime. No licensing, no registration, none of that, but just pure disclosure. That's my personal view.
I'll leave it at that.
I'll back that to go.
Yeah. Yeah, no question. Does it cost more in legal fees to do an ICO or STO? You don't need to answer that.
It really depends, right? Because for an STO, there's quite a rigorous process that most people go through. It's called a due diligence process, which if you go through that process, it's quite extensive, and it affords you a specific defence in the Corporations Act. So that if you go through that process, and something that you've said in your prospectus turns out to be incorrect, but you've gone through that process, you've got a defence. That defence is not available in an ICO context, so arguably there's less work to do, right?
Yeah.
In Singapore, it's an RMO. It's a restricted market operator licence. It's setting up in Hong Kong's setting one up in Malaysia. In Malta, it's called an MTF. It's called a multilateral trading facility. So all of these jurisdictions are coming up they're still a full EU, in this case it's an EU approved licence, and you can deal with it anywhere in the world. But the innovation comes from that they've got to get in there, and it's not just the market license, it's all the other underlying things that need to be done as well. But you're absolutely right. We need to lobby in this country that we take it seriously, because otherwise that this capital will flow offshore, and we don't want to do that, right? We don't want people to go overseas and set up in Singapore and Hong Kong and all that, because again, it takes away jobs and it takes away all the capabilities in this country. So we need to ensure that, like, was it ASOP, that we had an exemption for a company that did they did equity crowdfunding, and the government had a class order to give them the ability to do it. So we need to do something similar in Australia to provide that kind of capability, like John mentioned, that we have that capability, which the companies can list here, raise capital here, keep their people here. That's what we should all be fighting for.
Rick, during your speech you mentioned the AIM market in the UK itself was a favourable market. Could you comment on that versus
Can you repeat the question?
in the US?
Yeah, just to repeat the question, there was just why AIM, the reason I mentioned AIM. So does anyone know AIM, what it did? Does anyone? So what happened in London, we had the London Stock Exchange, as we all know. But the problem is the barrier to entry gets higher and higher and higher. And so AIM popped up 10 years ago, you know better than me, 15 years? 15 years. So AIM actually set up a reduced framework. It was still regulated the same way, but there were a lot lower barriers to entry. And so it was what everyone remembers, the Bendigo Stock Exchange, which became the National Stock Exchange. So AIM set up with what was called a nominated advisor structure. You didn't need to go to a broker. It was a whole process where they've tried to lower the cost of raising capital in the market. So London's trying that again. We've tried it in Australia. So as John mentioned, we've got the National Stock Exchange, we've got the Sydney Stock Exchange. It worked well in the Bendigo one to raise capital for gold and secondary raisings, but AIM worked well. It was very focused, much lower cost. It had lower barriers to raise capital. And so, but we need the aim of security tokens here in Australia to think laterally and provide that same level of thinking, apply new technology, and get up and running as quickly as we can with that same. But it literally was. It's a secondary market, lower cost of entry, and it was extremely successful. Like AIM signed up, 500, 1,000, I don't know how many.
1,000 companies.
In a year or two. So it's unfortunately our local exchanges have got, the two of them one has 2 or 3 listings, and the other one's got 40 or whatever, and kind of going backwards, unfortunately. So it's a matter of resurrecting that, because the question, it's very hard to get a markets license in Australia. It took Chi-X 4 years.
Why isn't NSX fulfilling that market?
That's probably not for me to. It's one of those ones. It's because what we all got to do is that. And the question was innovation. We need to innovate in these companies as well, because to attract talent, to attract clients, we need a good product. And if the product's not right, no one's going to come. So it's about representing the product. And there's a great opportunity now with what's going on to answer that exact question. But obviously I can't say.
Yep. Okay, there you go.
So I'm hogging the microphone. I'm going to give it away.
Pass it.
My question is a little bit technical. In the traditional exchanges, you have, or like in the IPOs, you have auditors who are looking at the accounting books and making sure that everything is done correctly. Now, all this is done automatically on the blockchain using smart contracts and airdrops, etc., etc. So all the discussion so far has been based on assuming that the codes are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. But I mean, so far it is all governed by the society, by the community. Now, once you talk about government regulations, when you talk about investors want to put real money in, then people want to make sure that these codes are actually doing what they're supposed to do.
Right.
So is there a body, like a third party, to verify these codes? Like a new generation of auditors who are, coding geeks who are also understanding accounting? How does that work?
Sure. Do you want me to get that? Or John, you want to do it? I'll do it. Yeah, it's a really good question. So the number one industry popping up right now is security token auditors. It's a big business, right? So anybody setting up an exchange needs auditing processes. And so if you're going to list a token, you need to actually have auditing done on your security token by an independent company, because it's really important. This token controls the voting, the voting. It controls the dividend policies and all that. So it's actually in the regulatory framework. So to an exchange, in terms of the sign-up process, anywhere in the world, will have like if you've got an AFSL or you're an exchange, in Australia, you need to get an annual audit, an ASIC approved auditor needs to go through all that kind of information. So in the regulatory world, that whole process of security token, the issuing, that they're correct, if you're burning them, all of that is audited, and the question still is who's going to regulate it. So it's a really good question. So there's all these independent there's groups popping up of exchanges where they're going to get together and discuss exactly that point. Because in Australia, I run 3 AFSLs, so I've got to get an FS 7071, I get an ASIC auditor into my AFSL, they have to sign all those kind of questions off that we're complying with the Corporations Act and everything else. So it's not defined yet, but every exchange is going to need to do exactly that.
All right.
Hey, Christian. Hi, I'm Rolf from Impact OTC. I also am recently an advisor to a group called Nugget, who also has a tokenization platform. In that context, we've started to do some thinking about a deep philosophical challenge that the industry has, which is essentially for those of us that have come into this industry to sort of make a better world. If we remove all friction from asset ownership, then people are going to buy the dip, just as they do, and pretty soon the rich own not just the current assets, but the land and a lot of other things as well. So we're looking to set up a think tank for those that are in the industry and those that are interested to start to look at some clever ways that we believe are possible to start to address that. So that just putting that out there for those interested. But I'm also very interested in hearing thoughts that you have.
Prash, I've got a thought of that if you want to. So I'll do it again. Prash, you want to? I've got a quick thought I had of it. I'll give you the reverse. I think it's the first time that we can get around that problem. Because right now, and again, as a 4-year, 5-year insider in the securities business, you're not seeing any of the deals. By the time it comes out to mum and dads, it's been everywhere, right? You wonder what's going on. So actually, we want the reverse. We want to use this as a facility that everybody's a client of the exchange, everybody gets access at the same time, there's no pre-selling it to other people and placing people and then letting it out in the market. We need to do the reverse. And so we're finding, actually I think you're going to find the reverse. If we do this properly, absolutely the reverse will happen.
Look, I'm an advocate as well, but the reality is when the market crashes, it's the wealthy that can scoop up the bargains.
Yeah, I'll give you a philosophical answer. So a world without friction is a very dangerous world. Imagine if that happens, I'd slip off my shoes and my seat automatically, right? And that's where the regulators come in intentionally to place friction so it doesn't become T+0, because they'll be really scared if something like that happens, because there needs to be some form of friction in order for the world to operate. So Prash, from an OTC perspective or securities, what do you think?
Just for the sake of disagreeing. There's behind every utopian reality there stands a very strong dystopian shadow. But I'll give you the other utopian possibility of frictionlessness and a use case for tokenization, which fits into a more utopian world perhaps. One of the things I like to always imagine is the tokenization of taxes. So I don't have any problem with paying taxes. I believe that my taxes should go to welfare, to healthcare, to public housing, public transportation. I have a problem with the defence budget. That's what I crucially have a problem with. I have a problem with my money going towards my politicians buying a new batch of F-16s so they can wave collective phalluses around. That's what I have a problem with. Imagine a world where you could, of tokenization of taxes, where instead of paying your taxes sort of arbitrarily towards a democracy that you think you chose, who then get to decide exactly what they want to do with that money. Instead, you got to tokenize your taxes into particular parcels which you thought you wanted that to truly go to. All of a sudden, your economic power, your fiscal power, takes on a greater power, takes on a greater libertarian power, takes on a greater socialist power than a centralized authority could ever make possible. Because it would, because we're human beings and we're psychologically basically primarily flawed. That, I think, is one of the great cases of tokenization, which steers completely away from the capitalist paradigm and lends itself back to the true libertarian cause, which this entire industry was fundamentally based on. I think I've spoken about this one before, I'm sorry if I'm ranting on things that I commonly rant on about, but these are the kind of things we possibly should rant on about.
Right. There you go. Yeah.
Hey guys, I think most of you know me. And I think Prash just sort of answered the question we're about to ask. Do you think with all this STO and people not being able to raise money from ICO or utility token, do you think it's actually killing the industry as such, or the utility? So everyone's sort of forgetting about a utility and just trying to raise a security instead of using technology where it was actually built for. So I know we personally are looking at having an STO next year, but we still don't have a utility, just not doing our money raise off the utility, but we still heavily believe that there's a strong utility for our token. We're just not doing our money raise off it because of obviously the Australian law. So do you think the STOs are going to kill the utility industry, or do you think they'll come back, sort of like what Prash said, about literally using a utility token for something?
Yeah, I think it'll find a balance that everyone will probably get too excited about security tokens, just like they get too excited about ICOs. And all the big money will get ultra competitive and all that sort of thing. The funny thing is that the free market will get better. And if you're an investor and you invest in a terrible ICO and that goes to zero, you're going to learn your lesson and do your own research when people say to do your own research and so on. And people would wise up and get smarter, and it probably would naturally mature. Whereas, yeah, I guess my fear is that now it gets overly regulated and everyone goes into an STO that maybe shouldn't have, and so on. And yeah, it's unfortunate because we do see it every day that people are already moving away from Australia or going down that STO route that might give a barrier to entry and not allow some people into who would have otherwise got in and so on. So everything, I guess, reaches equilibrium over time.
I think that what you're doing is basically what everyone's going to be doing in the future. They're going to be raising money through security tokens. Notwithstanding, there's still a place for utility tokens, but they're not going to be used to fund projects. They're going to be used to for utility purposes only, not to fund. So people will sell them as a pre-sale of a service for a platform that's already designed or developed through money that was raised through a security token offering.
We do need to keep control a little bit on who's doing what to identify people. And there's a lot of work on decentralised identification of people. That's verification and identification. So at the moment, all of us, it's still a centralised function because we don't have a good way. And I know people don't want to be AML'd and they want to have it anonymous, but it's very hard to do. And the second point, the trading, I put up all these points before about all the regulators are really concerned about this trading unregulated or decentralised. How do we make sure it's fair for the investors? It's easy to put in place front running and all these kind of things, but in a regulated environment, it's much tougher because we have to prove that our systems don't front run, we don't do all these kind of things. And the third one is the custody. So to me, the ideal solution is we need centralised AML, we need centralised trading purely to maintain market integrity rules, but decentralised ownership of our assets. So that you keep your security token, you keep your Bitcoin, but right now people just aren't familiar. You know, the average person on the street to figure out how to set up a wallet and keep their own Bitcoin is too hard. So I think long term, for this to work, so that security tokens, so decentralised, I totally agree, is the absolute way of doing it, but we just got to keep it fair to all the people that STOs don't become another ICO. But in a regulated world, it'll be extremely difficult for anybody to run a decentralised exchange where there's centralised regulation required. So I'm curious where it all goes, but I think we'll see it all be centralised and piece by piece be decentralised when we figure out, how do you do the decentralised trading and make sure that the market integrity is in place. But that's a very good question.
What if I told you it's been running for about 3 to 4 years?
I haven't seen it licensed. Show me an EU license. No, but that's the point. So I'm not disagreeing with you. I've got 100 of these that I'm looking at right now. The challenge is to get it licensed, to take it to an EU regulator, the Attorney General of the United States, right? And so when I say licensed, it's actually quite a big challenge, right? Because if you look just up the road here at Open Markets, we process $250 million a day in transactions. So that's a lot to license. It's $50 billion of turnover, and we just got to make sure that every one of those investors is protected. So you compare it to the securities industry. A normal broker we have about a $10 million capital adequacy requirement. So just a little quick story along that. So when someone loses money in a regulated exchange, we pay. We pay. So earlier in the year there were some problems in Australia where there were delays paying out monies for fiat. In a regulated broker like Open Markets, if there's a problem, the banks can't give us money to give it to the client. We have to give it to them on T+2. So we have a huge amount of money that's sitting there purely for that reason. So the problem in a decentralised world is when someone loses money, who's going to pay? It's a rhetorical question, so I don't answer it. But they're the kind of protections that we need to think about, because for people to trust the system, that it's okay, because right now the crypto wasn't that bad because it really only affected people that could afford to lose the money, let's be honest. There was a few people that mortgaged houses and when it ran up to 20,000 and dropped right down, but we can't afford that as a country for people that their life savings they get tied up in this and things disappear. So there's always got to be somebody, and everyone said buyer beware, and I totally agree. But for crypto to go mainstream, we need to sort custody out and we need a guarantee. And I know no one wants to hear that, and that's why the chicken wires don't throw anything, right? So I'll hide behind JC, right? But that's my 2-second rant on that. But you're 100% right, I'm more than happy to talk about it, but the proof in the pudding is go to ASIC, or let's go to one of the regulators and let's look at regulation. But I agree totally with you. Sorry, guys.
No, that's right, guys. I think we will wrap it up because I do want to have a good get around. I'm sure everyone wants to ask questions to all the guys individually afterwards and mingle. So thanks so much everyone for coming. I hope you've all learned something, and I think the future is very bright for cryptocurrency and security tokens. So thanks to all our sponsors and thanks to all our guests. Come up and say good day and have a drink with them, guys.
Thank you.